Welcome, everybody, to the Fanmouth Daily Fantasy Baseball Breakdown for Friday, May the 23rd. I'm Joe Marsh, joined today by Dave Del Grande and Jeff Collins. How you fellas doing?
Doing
I'm
great.
doing great.
All right. Thanks for responding. We got a solid slate of games tonight. Got some good stuff for you. We're going to go through all the positions. We're going to tell you who we like. We're going to help you build your lineup and go from there. Now, it's a good thing we have Jeff Collins on with us. He's our resident pitching expert. Pitching, to me, was a bit tricky today because I'm looking down the pitchers, and I can think of reasons not to start all of them. You got Felix Hernandez, only has 18 strikeouts through his last 4 starts. Kershaw was roughed up in his last start. C.J. Wilson's facing Kansas City, who doesn't really strike out a lot. Zimmerman only has, I think, 8 strikeouts through his last 3 starts. Sanchez is facing Texas. Kazmir's facing Toronto. So I'm looking at all these guys, and I can think of reasons to disqualify them. So I had to go sort of, default. I'm actually going to go with Kershaw tonight and just throw out that last start. I'm just kind of overlook it a bit. I think he's going to bounce back strong. If you throw out that last game, he's got a 1.74 ERA, 11.14 Ks per 9, which are numbers that I like. So that's kind of where I'm going to head in that direction. And then I may go with Lincecum, which I know is risky. I always feel nervous when I throw out Lincecum, but he has been good, especially in the month of May. 25 Ks through 23.2 innings. So I'm gonna be a bit scared doing it, but I'm going to probably stick with Lincecum. Another guy you can go with is Jordan Lyles. People might be scared, just like with Kershaw, because he was roughed up in his last outing, but he's pitching away from Coors, facing the Braves' lackluster offense. So he's a good play. With him and Kershaw, if people are scared of him and they don't start him, that may play to your advantage if they do come out and have a good start. So Jeff, help me out here. What are you doing with pitching?
I don't like any of those guys.
All right.
Last week I gave some off-the-wall pick that, was based on travel and stuff. It was De La Rosa in Colorado against the Padres, right? That was last Friday. So I always talk about Friday being my favorite day to look at that type of thing. And today it was rather disappointing because you've got a lot of teams that had a rest day yesterday, or they're coming back home after a short road trip. But there's one team that stood out. They're on their 8th game of the road trip right now, and they've been averaging like 2.71 runs per game. That's Milwaukee, and they're facing Tom Kohler today. And I think this is another guy that not a lot of people are going to be on. But 3 of his last 4 games, he's pitched 7+ innings and given up 0 runs. So one of those games was a little rough, one of the other games. But besides that, he's had pretty much one bad start all year. Milwaukee traveled last night. Braun left last night's game with an injury. It just looks really nice for Tom Kohler today. So I think that's the number one guy I plug into my lineup. And then from there, there's a couple different directions you can go. One being Felix Hernandez, who you talked about his lack of strikeouts recently, but luckily he faces the team that has the second most strikeouts in the league today, and that's Houston. Houston, an offense that really is up and down. They've got a lot of potential. They're one of those teams that they remind me of like Atlanta, where they'll strike out a lot, but they'll hit a lot of home runs. They'll put up 12 runs in a game of 5 home runs. But I think this is a good spot for Felix Hernandez. I didn't recommend him that game after he had 0 strikeouts because I was a little worried about how strikeouts projected moving forward with him. But I do think this is a good spot based on the matchup, and this is a guy that should go deep into games. He pitched 8 innings his last game. And basically the way Fanmouth scoring is, if you get a guy that can go deep into a game and rack up some strikeouts, then you're in good shape. So those are 2 of the guys I'm going to look at, and then I'll wrap this up with one more guy, and that's Anibal Sanchez. So this is a risky pick, of course. He just came off the DL, pitched his first game off the DL, and they limited him to about 80 pitches. So he didn't pitch very much, which is concerning because, like I said, you want a guy that's going deep into games. But for me, the matchup against Texas here, with the blow that the team just finds out that Prince Fielder is done for the year, a lot of times that'll just really kill the emotion of a team, and you'll see them come out and put out a stinker. And I think that's what's going to happen today is Anibal Sanchez is going to be in a really good spot to hopefully go, instead of 5 innings like his last game, maybe they'll give him a little more rope this time, and he can pitch 6 or 7 innings, get a nice win. I don't expect Texas to put up many runs today, like I said. So we'll see. But I know that's a lot of analysis there, but those are the pitchers I like today.
No, that's definitely, we appreciate that. A lot of good stuff there. Yeah, the only other thing I would add about Felix is I looked at the matchup too as he's facing Houston, but he's made 2 starts against Houston, and they were only, so-so. He's got 10 strikeouts in 12 innings, a 3 ERA, which is decent, but it's not what you'd want if you were paying top dollar for a pitcher. All right, Dave, we're finally over to you. What are you thinking of pitcher?
Well, first off, I hope Jeff is right about not a lot of people being on Kohler, because I think he's the obvious choice tonight. He's been unhittable at home. Milwaukee's not a good hitting team. They just lost Braun last night. I'm not even factoring in the travel schedule. Don't get me started there. But I think he's an obvious choice. I think he's a very low price guy. I was surprised to see how low his price is, considering how well he's pitched at home. And Miami, Miami wins all their home games anyway. So I think that's a great choice. On the surface, you would look at Wilson at home against Kansas City, Hernandez at home against Houston, and just say, you don't get matchups better than that. Heavyweight starting pitchers against 2 of the weakest teams in all of baseball. How can you not take those 2 guys? But the price is high on both of them, and I think you have to pitch Kohler tonight. So picking between Hernandez and Wilson, I think, is going to be difficult. I also fooled around already this morning with a lineup that had Chase Anderson pitching against the Mets. Now, we all know Mets are a terrible hitting team. Anderson is a very highly considered prospect who's come out pitching very well. And my only concern about the matchup is that he's going against Colon, who I think is going to pitch well against Arizona. And so I'm a little concerned about that. But I think Anderson is for a minimum price pitcher. It has a chance to pitch you a really good game tonight. If you pitch Anderson and Kohler, you will have an all-star lineup of hitters that you cannot believe. So that's one reason to consider something like that if you, like me, trust a prospect pitcher like that.
All right. Jeff, what are you thinking at catcher?
Catcher, I think I'm looking at that game a little differently than you are. I think the weather and the wind sets up nicely for it being an offensive game. So I'm not looking at the pitchers there. I'm going to want some hitters in that game. I think Buster Posey's the obvious direction to go if he plays. He came back from injury yesterday, played part of the game. I imagine he's itching to get back out there, and he should be good to go, but that's something you just need to keep an eye on. But wind's blowing out in San Francisco today, nice and sunny. It's not wet at all. I think it sets up really well for hitters.
Okay. I like going out, getting some A's in my lineup today against Liam Hendricks. This is a guy making his first start of the year. He's got a career ERA over 6. So, either Jaso or Norris, whoever's in the lineup, and if they're both in the lineup, whoever you have money for. Jaso's hitting .319 in May, hitting .292 against righties. Obviously, Norris has been hitting great. He's hitting .333 against righties. So whichever fits your budget, whichever's in the lineup, I think is a good play. More than likely, it'll be Jaso, which is good because he's a bit of a cheaper option. But I don't mind Norris either if he's in the lineup. Dave, what are you thinking?
Well, I look at Noesi of the White Sox, .333 batting average against left-handed hitters. The Yankees obviously have got a lot of good left-handed hitters. McCann is one of them. I think he's a very good play among the catchers. I'm going to try to get at least 2 or 3 of the Yankees lefties in the lineup. I do like Jaso if I'm looking to save money. I think he's a very good price play, but I'm hoping to have money to spend. I think I can save some on some of the infield positions, so I'm looking to spend at catcher. I'm concerned about Posey against Gibson. Gibson, 194 batting average this season against right-handed batters. That's awfully tough. And so I'll go with McCann at the other end of the spectrum against a pitcher who can't get lefties out.
Jeff, anything to add?
Nope.
All right, moving over to first base. Sticking with Dave's theme, I'm with him. I like getting some Yankees in there against Noesi. I think Teixeira is a very obvious play. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of Yankees left. They're kind of dropping like flies out there. But Teixeira is a good play nonetheless. Noesi's allowed a .331 batting average at home, 4 homers in 59 at-bats to left-handers. And Teixeira is a guy who just mashes from the left side, 8 homers and 80 at-bats. He's got 6 home runs in May. I think he's a very obvious play. Dave, are you thinking the same thing at first base?
I am, yes. I think Teixeira, if not for a particular outfielder today who I think is a no-brainer play, I think Teixeira would be at the top of that list. He's got 8 homers already against right-handed pitching. And like you said, Noesia, I mentioned as well, he's having trouble getting left-handers out. I do think there are other options at first base that are very good, so it's probably a position where you're going to be looking at your utility as well. I think Adams of St. Louis, a remarkably low-price guy, a left-handed power hitter against a Reds pitcher tonight, Bailey, 373 batting average against lefties, and so that looks awfully attractive to me as well, considering Adams' price. So I'm going to strongly consider him for my utility spot as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on Adams. I've been using him against right-handed pitching. He absolutely crushes righties. But the other guy I would throw in there, obviously, is Brandon Moss. Get another A's left-hander in there, especially one who crushes right-handed pitching. Jeff, what you thinking?
How you guys mentioned like 5 or 6 guys and not talk about Encarnacion? That's what I'm wondering. This is my home run pick of the day. He's had 5 home runs in his last 4 games. They're at the Rogers Center, which is probably the easiest place in baseball to hit. To me, he's a must-play, and I can't even consider another first baseman unless it's at the utility spot because he's just on fire right now. They face Kazmir, a lefty, and Toronto has the most home runs against lefties in the league, I believe. So a team that crushes lefties, a good team to stack. I'll be looking at a couple more guys as we move further along down these positions, but it's got to start with Encarnacion. I got Kohler in there, and the first thing I did in my lineup was make sure I got Encarnacion in there because he's not coming out in a way.
Yeah, I'm sort of torn on that game. I was, wouldn't start Kazmir, but also I wouldn't stack Blue Jays just because I feel like Kazmir's a good enough pitcher that, I'm not sure they're absolutely going to light him up. But yeah, Encarnacion and Bautista both do hit lefties very, very well. Jeff, what are you thinking at second base?
Second base, probably going to have to punt the position because I'm going to be spending big in the outfield and at first base with Encarnacion. So I'm going to be looking for a punt there. It's going to be one of those things where I'm looking at the lineups at around 3 o'clock and see who's hitting towards the top of the order and trying to find some value there. I think a good guy to look at is a guy like Brandon Hicks. He's not going to be hitting towards the top of the order most likely, but again, this is a game that I want to attack and have some exposure to. So Brandon Hicks, a guy with some power with the wind blowing out, is another hitter that I would like in that game.
Dave, what are you thinking?
Well, I agree with the strategy. It's 4th down, but I'm going to go for it on 4th down with my low-priced second baseman. I mentioned Grant Green a couple of times. He's a second. You get him at second base. He's been playing outfield. He hits left-handers well. He's not a big power guy, but he has been fairly consistent lately. I think the Angels are going to score runs against Duffy tonight. And like Jeff said about Hicks, he's not going to bat in the middle of the lineup, but in an American League game, your depth of hitters runs a little deeper than in the National League. So I'm for a very low price guy, I'm going to save money there and still think I got some potential.
All right. If I have money to spend on second base, it'll be on D. Gordon, who's a guy I like to use a lot, hitting 324 against righties. He's facing Hernandez, who's given up a 282 batting average against lefties. Again, I'm typically always looking at the stolen bases. Ruiz isn't very good defensively. He's given up 25 stolen bases this season against only 7 guys thrown out. And 5 of 6 have been successful with Hernandez on the mound. And same thing like I did last week. Sunday's the matchup you're waiting for. That's when A.J. Burnett's on the mound. He gives up a ton of stolen bases. I believe he's given up 10 already this season. So that's going to be another good spot where you're going to want to start Gordon. The Dodgers love to run.
Bonus picks again.
I did the same thing last week against the Diamondbacks. Yeah. I always like to look at the catching matchup, for D. Gordon and a few other guys.
Well, I think you're dead on with D. Gordon. If you pay up at second base, it has to be Gordon because, like you said, the matchup for stolen bases is incredible as well. He's facing a guy that doesn't throw the ball very hard. His fastball is 89 miles per hour, I believe. So it's like he's going to get plenty of opportunities to steal. So if you are going to pay up at the position, that's the direction you need to go.
Yeah, and then I agree with Jeff. If it's not that, if I don't have the money, it'll be a punt pick. There's not much to like in the low end at second base. Just always, if you can, grab someone who's hitting in the top of the lineup, who's, a platoon guy who's very cheap. Moving over to third base. Dave, who you got?
Well, Solardi is a Yankee lefty. I've talked about getting Yankee lefties in the lineup. He's considering been a highly productive guy this year, and yet he, is not one of the top 10 price third basemen, which is surprising. Facing a right-hander that gives up hits to lefties, I think he's a very solid play tonight.
Jeff?
Yeah, you guys keep talking about the Yankees. I'll keep talking about the Giants. Pablo Sandoval, another guy who's on fire right now, especially from the left side. And again, in a game where the wind's blowing out, this just seems like an obvious spot for him based on his price. When you look at his price on Fanmouth compared to other places in the industry, and there's value there because he's cheaper than on other places. So I think that Pablo Sandoval is a great play at third base. Mid-sevens right there for you. You can lock in probably a double tonight.
All right. Yeah, and I'm with Dave on Solardi. 333 batting average, 5 home runs and 87 at-bats from the left side. He's a much better hitter when he's hitting from the left side. And again, I just like picking on Noesi, 322 batting average against lefties. So, like I said, there's not many Yankees that you really love because of injuries, but I'm going to try to get at least a few of them in the lineup tonight.
And I agree. I like Jeff's play of Sandoval. I think that, I'm looking to get Giants left-handed hitters in the lineup. They don't have a whole lot of them, and one of them, Crawford, doesn't hit right-handers well, so there aren't a whole lot of options. But among those options, definitely Sandoval, like Jeff said. He's been as hot as anybody on the team right now. I think he's a good, solid play at a low price.
All right. And Dave, shortstop, what do you got?
Well, the numbers say that Escobar of the Twins should be a good play tonight. Lincecum has a 326 batting average against left-handers. Escobar is a very low-priced guy, but a 944 whip against right-handed pitching. It's like, whoa, it just seems like on paper a good matchup. Now, I'm not a big Escobar fan. I don't think he's an elite shortstop by any means. But if you look at his price, you're basically getting him for free. And so if I need to save money, I'll go there. If I have money to spend, I think to me, the best of the heavyweight guys is Hanley Ramirez, tonight against Hernandez of Philadelphia. Hernandez of Philadelphia is a guy who, 282 batting average against right-handers, far better than what he does against left-handers. So I'm looking, to get some right-handed hitting Dodgers in the lineup. And, Hanley Ramirez, of course, is one of them. So he would be my play if I'm looking to spend money there.
All right. Good stuff there from Dave. Apparently he was free. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
Jeff,
yeah.
Basically for free.
Basically free. Got to start him. He's free. Jeff, what are you thinking?
I agree with Dave on that pick because he's free. Or, even 4,200. That's a really good price. And I think if you spend a little bit more, Echeverria is a guy that I always look at to see if he's batting in like the 2 spot. They move him all around that batting order, but when he's batting up higher in it, that's when I like to look at him. So I'm going to look at that lineup when it comes out, see if Echeverria is in the 2 spot. And if he is, I'll probably slot him in. But if not, I'll probably slide down and take Escobar because I'm not solely on the Giants today. I like all the hitters in that game. I think that you can find value throughout both lineups.
All right, good stuff there. I would add to that Johnny Peralta. He's hit all 9 of his home runs this year against right-handers, and he's facing Homer Bailey, who's struggled this season. 5.44 ERA. He's given up 9 home runs. So that's a spot where you can possibly get a home run out of your shortstop position, which is always a good thing. And then moving over to the outfield, Dave's secret guy and my secret guy.
Secret. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The home run pick, it really jumped out at me. It jumped out at Dave. Jeff went in a different direction, but it's Giancarlo Stanton. He's facing Marco Estrada, who leads the league in home runs allowed with 12. 8 of those were served up to right-handers. And then you've got Stanton, who's got 12 home runs on the season, with 9 of those coming against right-handers. Obviously, he's much better at home because, like Jeff says, they're stealing signs. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's just an absolute great play. I'm going to start building my lineup with him and build from there. I like Puig as well. He's continued to hit well. He's hitting 403 in May, crushing righties, 8 home runs in 122 at-bats against righties. A couple more guys. One guy who Dave brought up yesterday, which ended up being a great call because he had a home run, was Seth Smith. He stayed hot. He's hitting 439 in May, 427 at home, and 345 against righties. Those are great numbers for him tonight. And then the last guy I'll throw out is Corey Dickerson. He's crushed right-handers, hitting 350, and he's done it away from Coors Field as well. He's hitting 318 away from Coors Field, and he's facing Gavin Floyd, who's a guy that we probably should be attacking a bit. He's given up a 351 batting average to lefties. So there's a lot to like in the outfield today, both in the high-price and the low-priced areas. Dave, what else are you thinking in the outfield?
Well, I agree with what you said there with, the fact that there's a lot of guys. You mentioned some guys that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but the guys I do agree with start with Stanton and Puig. I think both of them are big-time home run threats tonight. I'm surprised one guy you didn't mention, because you're generally very high on this team, is Adam Jones tonight against Cleveland. Cleveland's starting a minor league left-hander tonight. Jones and Cruz both crush left-handed pitching, and they're playing at home. I just think this is playing Jones and Cruz is Cruz, of course, in Fanmouth, you have to play at utility. These are two guys you need to consider. Now, all 4 guys I've mentioned there are very high-priced guys, and you're unlikely to be able to play all 4 of them. But I think there are lower-priced guys worth talking about, including a couple in matchups that I've already mentioned. You mentioned Seth Smith. I'd come right back with him tonight. He's a very hot hitter against right-handers. The Cubs righty tonight, very mediocre. You've got a Giants left-handed hitter in Pagan, who's back in the lineup. You've got a Yankee left-handed hitter in Gardner. I consider those two of the best matchups going, and 2 mid-range price guys. So I think you can go in many different directions there, but I think you have to start with Stanton and Puig, hope to get them both in there, and then adjust from there.
All right, great stuff there from Dave. Jeff, finish us off with the outfield.
Well, you said something interesting talking about Adam Jones crushing lefties, and that's been true this year, but I think that he's a candidate for regression there, because over his career he's actually really struggled against lefties. So I expect that to go down. If I were to choose between one of those guys in the outfield, it would be Cruz. So that would be the direction I go there, but I think, again, Joey Bats is a guy I want. Bautista, I know you guys have some faith in Kazmir today, but when this lineup mixed with that ballpark, I cannot see Kazmir having even a decent game today. So I do not mind the right-handed bats, and I'm going to have Encarnacion and Jose Bautista probably both in all of my lineups. So that would be the big hitters there, and then you've got Giancarlo Stanton, of course. I mean, a great pick, not my home run pick. I think he is a good candidate for a home run, but not the best candidate for a home run, but we'll see. And then a really good value guy has been James Jones for 4,200. He's a guy who's batting leadoff for Seattle now, and he's facing Houston today. It doesn't matter who he's facing for 4,200 when you're batting leadoff. That's a guy that you can just plug in your lineup and kind of pray. You don't really have to look at anything else. No deep analysis needed. So I think it's a good idea to maybe punt with a guy like James Jones. Dave, you can use your fourth down joke that I know you've been saving for a while, and then go huge with the other 2 big guys, and then you leave yourself a lot of room at your other positions if you just punt one of those outfield spots.
All right, that wraps up all the positions. We'll go ahead and give you a little final word to help build your lineup. Dave, what do you got?
Well, I think I say. Today, once again, the big decision is going to be on pitching. I mean, you can go with 2 heavyweight pitchers tonight, in which case, we've talked about a lot of good bargain plays in the field. So you can go with Hernandez tonight, and Wilson, and still get a pretty good lineup out there. Or you can go in the other direction and go with Kohler and maybe one of the other cheaper guys, like I mentioned, Chase Anderson. It's worthwhile, especially if you're not all that familiar with the daily fantasy game, to try different lineups. Put the 2 heavyweight pitchers in there, see what you're left with in your hitting lineup, see if you like it. Meanwhile, put 2 lightweight pitchers in there and look at what lineup you have left and compare the 2. And I did this. I mentioned this earlier. I put Anderson and Kohler in my lineup, and I've got all stars at basically every position. It's amazing what kind of lineup you can put together by putting a $6,000 pitcher like Anderson in your lineup rather than a $19,000 pitcher like Hernandez. So it just depends on what kind of team you want to put on the field. And I think you can put a very exciting lineup out there if you go with Anderson as one of your pitchers.
Jeff, final word.
Again, I think pitching is key. This is a week or a day that I wouldn't blame you for fading all the top options. Even Felix Hernandez, if you wanted to go cheap, I'm not going to blame you.
Jeff, are you still with us?
Crushes left-handed pitching. They're one of the best teams in the league at it. I understand it's Kershaw, but he struggled his last time out, and he's only had a few starts this year. Hasn't been incredibly impressive. Doesn't look like last year's Kershaw. So all those top options up there kind of have their question marks, which we've talked about a little bit. So if you want to go cheap and save, and then go with a guy like Tom Kohler or maybe an Edwin Jackson pitching in San Diego, and just absolutely stack your lineup, then do that.
All right. Good stuff there. Yeah, I was hoping these guys would give me some clarity on pitching, and yeah, they definitely threw out some good options. I'm definitely going to consider Kohler, but also they gave me more confidence that people are scared of Kershaw for what he did in his last start, which I think makes him that much more of a better play if people don't want to start him. And you get a chance to start one of the best pitchers in the league. Like I said, you throw out that game. He's got a 1.74 ERA this season.
Why do you throw out that game, though?
It's an outlying performance. I mean, everybody has a bad game. And then going around, I like whoever's catching for the A's. I like getting some Yankees in your lineup. I think Stanton obviously is one of the biggest plays. I would probably pair him with Puig in the outfields, and that's kind of the bones of how I would build my lineup tonight. All right, that wraps it up. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you guys very much for joining us. If you want to see our full rankings, they're posted at blog.fanmouth.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at PlayFanmouth. Thanks a lot.